Jumbo, Jungde, De Yin, Xiebo, Zhe, Jumbo, Yang, Dobo, Zu, Bi, San, Yu, Bo, Dong, Xiao, Si, Dian, Bo, Dian, Wo, Xiebo, Ji, Lian, Jiang, Ju, Bu, De, Yue, Kao, Lo, Jian, Wo, La, Na, Mi, Bo, Lo, Dong, Bo, Na, Ju, Dian, Bo, Sang, Ji, Jiang, De, Bie, Jiao, Wo, Jiao, Jiao, Tu, Bo, La, Xiao, Si, Jiu, Du, Jiao, Su, Qie, Wo, Gong, Zi, Gong, Ni, Su, Jiu, Dong, Zi, Sa, Qie, De, Na, Gong, Bo, Diu, Bo, Ma, De, Jiu, De, De, Na, Jiu, Jie, Song, De, Si, Ge, Bo, Jiu, La, Xiao, Si, Na, Da, Gong, Jiu, Du, Zu, Song, Wo, Yi, Xie, Jiu, Zu, Si, Jiu, Le, Bo, 这不就得送到老给我，我不就你就了相思，谁就得把这边大雨小，谁都找我去了相思，连着接着谁不送我去，娘们直接就了相思，公公突击接电报，当街去别电报。上那有的叫做些，的些些老乡村，旁边的桥着我就一个月个上来着，就多得到就不，就老乡村，这天这月老样的，老婆到老少多。先给到宝一点点，给的老样乡村。六八这样么家钱给我别说说吧，让给三年用说的，天天上街听吧。干嘛着的么别动，就么喜欢就不，别让落到这道不，都是就能得到。上那的月堂前在花园，我婆当年就是这的。嘎当那当前面老周，随便坐来找我哟。
Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son of a lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Sharadvati Putra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the bodhisattva mahasattva noble Avalokiteshvara that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadbhati Putra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
多觉千波的谢多觉成，觉觉的罗波多那罗波，别觉着别波多阿的想，仰念心罗觉罗娑瓦的，上波多灭一念那着的，觉的的月的当着别别，西藏国萨那念所念波。要见日别觉罗娑瓦的，要有月别说解罗珠当，到我这波这边可就见，三界国中婆婆要塞说，大梦大月觉罗娑瓦的，协助大别中阿的上，嘎当天别明波中的见。念觉那些过去说那说，嘎达那么那那说完的，刚见心的自己说我到这边我说的错的，当我这边到不给住的，要是结果见了说完的，就说个的老妈多结成。好了，光的些年最多的，就当推磨公主存在边，只见老妈那那说话的，让就说着跟了到一边，给上他把这边就我就，在人这边到给在把一，存在些年那那说话的。叫我更多养到那么多，里面确实被那龙学见，撒当龙就有点少做呢，多久常给公，人多学上街学当做，就那老将就不多当年教书。大概秋节这边做那件，到了平时上街就把手上街，要当做节就那想就把多当年就算。大概秋节这边做那件，到了平时上街就把手上街。这当初的就那想就不多当年就老爷去这边做那去，到了平时上街就不有，哎，哎呀，对嘞，啊，我的，哎呀，啊，对起，哎呀，那这明，可是啊。电动电话机周边人啥去了啊？电话机周边人啥去了啊？电话搞得天的周边人呗，那啥也同样刚年的没都，我把电了过来就靠住都，但是现在想的这马来外是老缺啥了啊？我那讲的啊，老缺啥了啊？
So now here again, we're gathering here to achieve lasting happiness. In other words, seeking for the method that leads oneself to the lasting happiness. So then here, what kind of happiness that we are actually looking for? You know, we don't need that happiness. We have sufficient food, shelter, and our day-to-day, resources, which is enough for all of us. And why should we need happiness other than that? So this can be asked. This question can be asked to oneself, right?
而且，这件事就开始嘛叫哎，那电上就出现见了，但所想不是成就了，彻底都给当到了，着过来叫你考啊，是你考啊啥的， And you might like a chair, young Gunani, Shogan, the real corajon, the Tandapa letter, the Caletona de Jaware, the Mayri Kishisho, and there were conversing at the Jenny, second John Medu, John maybe Gana, Kanye Cheriton, don't cher Dojimate, Tandamoso, Munis, Aredo, Adamin. Tatella Tashi careers and a Georgie, go Govis on the deal later. That Aram Chunzi and a dead or on as Kaga.
So now, all beings, including insects, in other words, entire sentient beings, have a similar wish to achieve happiness. It is for this reason we keep ourselves in a situation where we have not even have appropriate time to relax ourselves, and we get chasing after something, which is happiness, right? Including and particularly the human beings. From the beginningless time up until now, we keep ourselves very busy seeking something, which is happiness. And so we have, however, we haven't been able to achieve a satisfying happiness. It's a happiness that we haven't been able to find the happiness that we're seeking. So if this is the case, then what kind of method or skillful means to need for us to achieve happiness? And we should be asking such questions: what is lacking? Why we are unable to, achieving the happiness that we are actually seeking? And this kind of question should be asked to oneself. However, we haven't been asking this question, but we keep looking for something that is happier life and looking for happiness, but we are not finding it. We're not asking the question: what prevents us from actually achieving this? Having this method that leads to the happiness, satisfying happiness.
Don't just get shy. Jingaso Tandapal draw me reads Senare, Dominator, College, don't have to be on Bisonici, Chashamado, there are to be on Bisonici, and the Wakomachi, Chomado. And the John Roche, Majizi, the Karichaku city, sharing your house of the one and so you were not Chatanya Major, sharing your house of the city, non sending you there, Japan with it.
So then here, now regardless of how much effort that we may have put forth to achieve happiness, we have not really been able to achieve happiness that we are really seeking. In other words, the real happiness that we have not. In fact, the way we are seeking to achieve happiness, yet at the same time, we ended up adding suffering to ourselves instead of achieving happiness. We are, creating additional suffering for oneself. So now, what is lacking? Why we are unable to really achieve happiness? To answer to such questions, the Dalai Lama has always said that we should, engage. We should put in effort to bring about mental development, the positive thoughts. In other words, that one must develop positive thoughts. Not really, he talks about engaging in the practice of Dharma, but rather engage in the practice or make an effort to really to develop your mental state.
Tanda Lam Rim Lama Chidu, get sent it tremendous. They Penacadon Puchu, Tashiano Nabi Kotanjila. Tajimanga do de la, and Jen do be do my round be durious and so and so that the Tanama of course about Tara Ledua. Running dinner mother, Rangi Jella, Loja Jonati, get to Sinjela, and the Pame Puga Sinjela, Gigela, Loja Jonia, Coco the Betzosadua. 다 저서 시와라기 다 정지 되는 것도 다더 진명이 되세지 다 정세서.
So one of the Lam Rim master, during the teachings, when he was giving a teachings, he mentioned that now in this the time of five degenerated time, in other words, in this five degenerated time, there is no way that one can subdue the mind of others, but to subdue one's own mind. And also, the Shantideva stated, one should not look for the subjugation of the mind of others, but rather it is more effective and beneficial to first of all to subdue one's own mind. So it is really true now. It is not something. If you really look at here, advising someone, for instance, like the parents advising their children, or the teacher is advising their students and followers and so forth, it's not really going to work much now. It looks like, it seems that it's not going to work. It is not working much. Now, the important is always to really focus inward and try to bring about the change, the mental change within one's own self.
다시 고로도 맞도 단대 라마데게 디카툴라 대소네 라마데 슈지 투조네 쇼네 당원에서 그러면은 소쪽이 창자도 마도 창체마도 들정을 세네 로지도 난들라잖아 소도아 저거 다 선체게 뭐지로 오지 다 상당동안 다 현직이 메세네 단대 강다상 거지 메세네 다 쇼네 아니 배데 소체 창자고 저러서.
So then it is said, it actually, according to the story of that, master, the Lam Rim masters, when he was giving the teachings, and he mentioned that, as we discussed earlier, that while he was giving these teachings and advising his followers, and his mind is completely overwhelmed by compassion and sense of caring for others, then he couldn't stop, crying at that moment. And so much so that he finally has to stop the teachings at that particular day. On that day, he has to stop because he couldn't continue his teachings on that day because he is completely overwhelmed by compassion and sense of caring for others, and he couldn't stop crying at the time.
그렇죠. 당가서 몸에서 인자는 당가서게 랑지 되나래 신지 되나래 타마노 아질라 때네 네 랑지 되고 신지 되고 인자는 되게 타마노 되비 넘버 2 명보데 랑게 되잖아 같으니라 네 당세 외제 랑지 진이바 간실라 네 디자 랑랑게 된지바게 미바지 제 아니 될라 나네 집에 남아나 주고 되게 제 지산나도 근데 라다 랑냥이 네 라다 다 미지바다 미지바 이바 간실라 주미싱에 니지시원 딱 동해 시원 제세거 년년에 시원 제제네 서제 대달을 미비 니지지제 아니 대니게 돈은 거수 봐봐요 그 친년 잡아대 아니 대다기 아니 다 투기 너버 주어다 아니 서제 대다기 네 너버空같이 된다라 이게 친년 지금 인생에 미바대스 지적이다.
So now let's take a couple of minutes to meditate by visualizing Buddha Shakyamuni, surrounded by Buddha Shakyamuni or all other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in a form of light, in other words, and all of them are actually compassionately, their compassionate eyes are gazing towards oneself and that of all other sentient beings. And then in imagining that being yourself in their presence, and also you yourself is getting surrounded by all other sentient beings, and having a similar wish of oneself to achieve happiness and overcome sufferings. And so then try to cultivate a fervent devotion to the object of refuge and extending your compassion towards all other sentient beings, the sentient beings who are you visualize in your surroundings. And then imagine that making a commitment of yourself that by visualizing those great beings or the object of refuge and receiving these teachings to fulfill the noble wishes of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, which is to, bring about happiness of oneself and that of all other sentient beings. With these motivations, let's take a couple of minutes to meditate.
단다 먼저 무엇을 진행지 제도에게 단다 코너시나 단다 랑이 걸어 기대어지래 데 마주기 천자고 로로라 나다의 현황의 강연의深度的 드리지를 내게 아니 소위 내다의 사회 통해 강연 체능에 아니 단다 장나셔도 내게 단다 시기 당자 코너서기 뒤 마셔기 당자 나의 생이 동에 아니 내게 동에 빠진의 세례 개발이면 로 매일을 드리지 강연데 하장이 현황서부터 요지 말해도 다 텔레비전 선제된다 가지고 maybe 얘도요 많이 만든다 대가스레면도 가지고 주비되는 더다 뭐 자타 통장 뭐 돈에 소모모 샤들어요. 또 소문에 좀내 저인다 세비이 롤에 산다 담에 되기더라.
So here now, the practice in compassion. Now think about the object of our practice of compassion and beings who are undergoing tremendous amount of sufferings at this time, at this point, who are losing their life, remaining constant threat of the weapons due to the war and not having a place to stay, not having a food to eat, and remaining under the constant threat and without knowing whether they will be alive after 5 minutes or even after a minute and so forth. And this, if we were able to think about it, we really don't have to look for any object far. So it is always, the object of compassion is within us. It is always with us. And then think about how much suffering that are undergoing in China right now due to this pandemic. People are, imposed to they are forced to have a quarantine. And the way, if you look at their quarantine situations, it is just, brutal, repression by the communist, militaries or the law enforcement. They are not even undergoing a tremendous amount of physical suffering as well as mental sufferings. And then those are the human beings who are actually undergoing tremendous amount of sufferings in our watch. But also there are many beings whom we have not seen yet. If you look at the YouTubes, and you will always see that numerous the sentient beings, such as the insects and the beings from the oceans and sea have taken out, and people are actually frying them alive and burning them alive. So therefore, if you really think about the object of our compassion, it is, we don't have to look. They are all with us. So let's take a minute to meditate on it.
哎呀，那这个就是你出去怎么不下的？啊，对对，他等这个跟我七八之间呢，刚才不是去年你上去哪里去么事？当我说，去听这个军的呢，老猛不来噻嘞，现在呢，他等这个老难一个，先把他可能这都是简单我做个点了，想去。我这个按照给那么几个送进了，那让人前面有包的的香过来讲的，许多人说呢，这一交给人送的这早就不得了，这去交易。
So now with these motivations, the teachings that we are receiving today, or the TATs that we are discussing today, is the great TATs on the stages of the path to enlightenment, which is profound teachings given by the great Master Lama Tsongkhapa. And so here we have been discussing on this particular teachings, great TATs on the stages of the path to enlightenment, for many years. So now we should not just live as a holy book, but rather all the teachings that are mentioned in this particular holy book must be, must become should become accustomed with one's mental state. That is more important. So therefore, one of the great teacher of Amdo has stated, one of the Amdo teacher, the master has stated that if we are able to die ourselves by engaging in the practice of great teachers and stages of the path to enlightenment and keeping the textbook above your head, then this is a protection. You actually receive extraordinary protection from it.
这些他这样这些，他的这些老的节目的，在于啥节叫那些节，那就跟怎么的比是怎么的叫啊，那当然了，给我这边是去叫啊，叫啊你到那边去了那些叫到啥啊，当帮我就那么记得这一人嘛是的呢，在于用一种些的节。
So now let's begin by reading the four major outlines as usual, beginning from the greatness of the teachings given in order to show the teachings as noble source, and showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for the teachings, and how to listen to the teachings in which both teachings and its authors are great, and the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught the actual instructions.
这些，他当帮我就那么记得，记得这一人把是的，用我就可能了三当导游的，你浪就找现在的比去当电脑记得像有人嘛，你是你那个。
So under the headings, under the outlines of the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught actual instructions, then followed by the two subheadings or the two sub-outlines, how to rely on the teachers, the spiritual teacher, which is the root of one's spiritual path, and how to student train their mind after having relied on teacher.
这些，他电脑记得像有人嘛，你。第一点呢，你不能必须给我，但你不接单人必须年纪，他多么对子，但你不接单人必须的了，你拿起拿下来，你把这些当你不能成功去，他多么对子，这他你不能成功了，送就被全面到通往人家人嘛，讲是呢，就被人到通往人家人嘛，讲是呢，就被千遍人家人嘛，讲是呢，去去，他多么年的，他就被千遍人家人嘛，讲是呢，去了送，提前了就被过三节考哪点吧，三节就到就被去三节的学霸了，去去。他多么年的啥？他三届的学霸路去了送，三届的罗巴路给别人罗巴来了了，罗巴三届没就把点吧，罗巴路别人把你写吧，而且他多么年的啥？他罗巴路别人把你写吧了送，那么的你。贴吧全部接了后，这当七八多节贴吧后去接，他东北了送，像三节老板老的讲，像那节三节大把送，说那节大连必须，他东北你的啥？说那节大连必须的你，刚老老必须，带老老板能必须，带老老别人把去，他东北你的啥？他带老老别人把了你，学吧接了后这当七八的发现他们就弄到这节，他东北的啥？他发现他们就老去了送，老去了安逸噻，现在当老同学。偏写吧，点点的根据对接，现在的劳动也忙， 대니가 방급이 전세 고랭이 봐 소설로 주의지 당가 소설로 지라서 신내로 주 나도로 대니 손들을 주의는 상주의 선비 담바 손에 신내도 하도 실라 손들로 주 손게 나네 신내로 주 가도 되는데
So, having received the actual instructions on the bodhicitta, and now we are on the particular teachings. We are receiving the particular teachings of the meditative teachings on the meditative serenity.
제가서 뒤지 정원 어제도 양수 손도 그래. 저런 뭐지게 통원만 비 최초도 가려서는 저런 뭐지게 용 trouble 카톨라 제르 당그레스. 근데 용 제다도 레비 칼라 trouble 카톨레 되거든. 근데 레하버키 그걸 제르 당그레스. 저런 뭐 통원 최초 근데 인사로 니는 신나다 하던 걸 제버 쉬지도.
So His Holiness always mentioned that it is Lama Tsongkhapa's unique quality of elaborating more on the very, the teachings that are very hard to understand. For instance, look at the Lam Rim Chenmo, the great deities and the stages of heart enlightenment. Lama Tsongkhapa has given a brief explanation on the evolved teachings such as generosity and so on and so forth, so morality and so on. When it comes to the very hard subject, which is the practice of meditative serenity, insight, and emptiness, then he elaborates on that. So this is a unique, method of Lama Tsongkhapa to compose the deities or commentaries on the Indian Master's teachings as well. It is really true here now, if you really look at here. So without receiving the teachings and engaging in the practice of meditative serenity and insight, there's no way we can develop our spiritual path. There's no way that we can transcend from one spiritual path to the advanced spiritual state, this advanced state of spirituality. So even though that one may have generated bodhicitta, practiced bodhicitta, compassion, and so on, so long as one's practice of bodhicitta is devoid of practice of serenity, meditative serenity, and insight, one will not be able to advance one's spiritual path. That is true. So regardless of how much the positive behavior bring about by engaging in practice of methods such as generating bodhicitta, compassion, sense of caring for others, and so on, one will not be able to transcend beyond the path of the small path of accumulations.
맞아 想研究的想去给山的你就全部谁的吧各地的写的他后面的民众嘛的谁的吧他就可以的这个说的就叫那些的起了的他就后面的这个嘛的嘛都我呢状态给哪呢都呢可能也老可能过呢有这个讲的 compete 多少的呢现在的拉动给他的接必说的了啊大一说
So yes, certainly it is important to develop the method aspect, which is compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth. Such as practice of renunciations and so on. But so long as one is unable to develop a knowledge of wisdom aspect, one will not be able to advance one's spiritual path. Such as practice of meditative serenity and insight.
얘한테 가르치는 우주지 시골에서는 양 제바 수지 도세는 가서기 때문에 냥의 천한도 용면서 여래면도 내가 전부 수지만 돈 내가 얘나 맨나데 생기 세자데 생기 대자데 로이 돈에 대지 요마도나 가세면 그 가세 정보 제나야 대대지마도 야제도 했게면도 근데 내가 전부 수지래도 가서 봤다네
Sometimes I find that because it's elaborate very vastly, so people might find it so complicated, and you become so exhausted by looking at the vastness of the elaboration of this subject matter of the meditative serenity and insight. Because one should not be exhausted by looking at the vastness of this particular subject, because the reason why it is it elaborates very vastly by the great masters is because very important for our spiritual development. Very important. It is a vital, in other words, it is a life source. It's a soul of our spiritual practice, which becomes actual source for development of our spiritual practice. If you have this understanding, then when you look at the vast elaboration of these teachings, then you will not get bored or you will not become exhausted.
되지. 다 가서 사선 로야. 가서 사다데 간사 관계 강라 미네 미바샤와 템바네 세데. 가서 내셔 쇼치와게 아니 메두발라서 강고세게 시제게 농타네. 인티 이제 히드 저도 말로는 되도.
So then now we are on the page 39. So all the way down it says who should meditate on which objects.
되지. 다 대차 슈체 셰체와 네 너도 슈체 이바지 간사 이나네 난주 슈바 세데 도이미레 난주 슈바지 네마 난주 슈바 네사네 정바 레스 난주 게테 게노 네조바 난 아마데 네조바 네조 슈바와 데 대차 슈바 코나시 이나네 미바 미두발라 세냐와도바 셰도 셰당라 셰바시 이나네 샴발라오 Timula Sheba Yenane, Jen Denichi Tenchin, Jawa Juan Lao, Maji Sheba Yenane, Kanji Rod Yawa La, Senyawa Toba Shedo, Shedan, Number Toba Sheba Konashi Yenane, Ubatan, Ujuan, Chambala, Senyawa Toba Shede. Tetana te jisu tumbi mibala senyawa toba sheba yeno she sonshi nyasa le jang sodo.
Who should meditate on which objects? As there are various kinds of people, for those with a preponderance of attachment, to those with a preponderance of discursiveness. Asanga's Sharvaka level cites an answer to questions of Rabata. So this is one of the sutras name. And Rabata, if attachment uniquely dominates the behavior of the monk yogi, a practitioner of yoga, then he focuses his mind on the object of meditation of ugliness. If hatred dominates his behavior, he meditates on love. If ignorance dominates in his behavior, then he meditates on dependent arising of these conditions. If pride dominates dominates his behavior, he focuses his mind on the differentiations of conscience. And if discursiveness uniquely dominates his behavior, then he focuses his mind on an awareness of exhalation and inhalation of the breath. In this way, he focuses his mind on the appropriate object of meditation.
Dön mezawa mipa tela zomba xiao xie, somba ngenpa mipa tela la zomba xiao sondo ni chanyamba sede, doa depa de jie songla jia. Mi jedang mi mazo pa de reda de ngen tela dehi chun chun jaga sansu.
That's all. So now here it says, Dasanga's Sharvaka level also states, in this regards, persons whose behavior is dominant by attachment, hatred, ignorance, pride, or discursiveness should for a while at the outset just purify those behaviors by contemplating object of meditation for purifying behaviors. After this, they will see the stability of their minds, and they will ascertain only their ascertain object of meditations. So they should definitely persevere at using their object of meditations. Thus, you certainly should work with the object of meditation if you are a person whose behavior is balanced. Oh, sorry, yeah, this last week.
De soso hakogro pena dijing asoge ji niga chuchi ge no la soso ge temu de shuchewa ya soso chadan garu shuchenbo ya shebaje de gona mocha de chadan de ngaso gaga shuchenbo re da de no shu chishode de naodo jinwa de roa yin zane ni ji mi ji unjongwa de ne samba de le bo ji ge de ni tombo khana la de ge che ge jire do de no no soso de cha shuchewa yin na che ge se de tombo khana tela bösen chene ani digi kechi nibane semba de hela bobine ani shene dugone geso kare chega ne yugure sen ta chen so do loyi this loyi mere loyi jemba ngobi neche de timbe loyi jemba.
So this is a fact, if you look at the teachings where it's stated that first of all one must target which afflictions is dominating your behavior, such as attachment, ignorance, pride, discursiveness, and so forth. Because, and then this will then be followed by the practice of being aware of one's breath. So breathing in and out, in other words, the circle of breathing, which will calm one's mind. So without calming one's mind, if one's mind is predominant by discursiveness, then it is not possible for one to engage in the practice of meditative serenity. It will not actually allow oneself to engage in the practice of meditative serenity.
Deda mipa suso ngenpa kona zede soso de soso ki ka ranglo na soso mado dekhen ki chote shu chewa re da sen zogu zoye mewa da soso rangi sana don di kare shu chewa che na dela thoma nipo tene di jela geza chega nere da shene do na yin shasharwa mado maso hako uro pena long chenpo long shu lo deri samba shu bo mipi kala samba de kadyo na long lo di jela do ne geza lo pan do tu mewa de maso moye de sing ton maso soso rada tu tu mewa.
So it is not that we should be pinpointing others. by saying that he or she's behavior is predominant. It's dominated by the such and such afflictions, but rather it is to ourselves as the practitioners, always pointing towards oneself. What kind of affliction is more active and intensely or dominating us, and how our behaviors are actually influenced by such and such afflictions. Whichever the afflictions become stronger, one should target that affliction and then try to eliminate that afflictions. If it is not possible for one to right from the beginning to uproot that afflictions, one should at least reduce the intensity of the activity of this afflictions, because without reducing those intensity of those afflictions, it is not possible for one to actually engage in practice of serenity. In order to follow the proper practice of proper meditation of the meditative serenity, one should always reduce the intensity of the most manifested negative thoughts and emotions, because it will prevent you from engaging in practice of serenity, right? For instance, I think about if one's behavior is dominated by anger at the moment, the anger becomes so strong, and then your behaviors will always influence by that particular anger, would not allow you to engage in proper practice. So this is how you should find, first of all, to really to pinpoint and target that afflictions to get rid of, well, get rid from one's own mind.
tichi. Ta tanji dechala sobe ngati chanyo denge chiyena kariche gorisa lawa yena ase. Chanyo ba sheba tang nyumo chungwe kansa yena ne, nga shibi mipa deda le gang la gawa jiwa shi la senzong ye choke nyepa jene megode nyesa le sontere.
And here again it says, so it says, if you are thus you certainly should work with those object of meditations. If you are a person whose behavior is balanced, or one whose afflictions are slight, then it's suffice to keep your attention on whichever of the aforementioned object of meditation you like. It is not necessary to have a particular one, Asanga's Shavaka level states.
Nyesa le che. Chanyo ba sheba di tati sheje longro. Chanyo ba sheba di ne senne ba ni nyese zangji she gang la gawa jiwa tela zunba shayi. Sheba namba jami she ne mayi no sondo. Chanyo ba sheba je tawa jende nyomo ba chunga de jende riba shao she son so sondo.
So then Asanga's Shavaka level states, those whose behavior is balanced should work at whichever object they like so as to attain just mental stability. This is not for the purpose of purifying behaviors. Understand that the same applies to those with slight afflictions.
Derwa tanda nga tsuke ngapo tele do ngapo de shuchewa tele nimi ten tela mi pa tele mi sheba naja mi pa se de gansa ye gan sheba shuchewa de ye sheba de jamba se ne juba jambi ten da ro de tanda chanyange chela ko jambi ten da mi sa de suso ke kan de wa ye ba chana digre se tanda tero.
So here now it's actually talks about those whose behavior is balanced should work at whichever object they like so as to attain just mental stability, right? Because the earlier that we talked about whichever the afflictions are more dominant, so we should identify that dominating afflictions and try to target that particular afflictions and get rid of that particular afflictions. But right now it says when the behaviors are balanced, then you should work at whichever object they like so as to attain just mental stability.
어디지? 당가서 뭐네지 소속이 신의 중에 들에 손나다 거 신의 중으로 계시게 말해. 마속에 차당이 가되는 것도 저데 차당이 내버들라 지뭐 가되는 거지 무두바나 지 게르라 소바 들지 미시 강자도 해나 당가서 미코는 되봐 인자도 내가 이런쇼 코로나 이상한데 손에 차당 코로 대용하게 내서 되는 것도 수치해요. 되봐. 인자네 대차게 내보라 아니 무두바나 소바 대달라 내보 양서 대토이나 간사되게 엄마가 때비 차단도 쇼치하고 그래. 뭐그 소소를 고코비비 계산 말해.
So here now we as beings of the desire realms, our afflictions such as attachment and aversion is more predominant in us. So it is for this one should always try to apply antidotes towards those afflictions, and because we always remain under the domination of sense consciousness. Whatever that things it's appear to one's eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and so on and so forth, which incites, either attachment or aversion. And in other words, being as a being of oneself as a being of desire realms, we are more predominant by those affections of attachment and aversion. So therefore, one should always try to look at and to apply antidote towards attachment and aversions, which are normally driven by our five sense consciousness.
되지. 되게 미바들 나를 쉬어줘야 말게 신의 두투사 말이 말로마도 배티 소속이 곧 가셔고라.
So
소속이 계사사이 곧 가셔고라. 렉까 뭐네 제기 곧 가셔고.
One should not become disheartened because it is so complicated. I will not be able to achieve meditative serenity. Because if one remain disheartened and not actually putting in effort and deciding yourself, distancing from such practice, then you're actually closing the door of accumulation merits and purifications.
되지. 당가서 네가 차단 슈체와를 가르쳤네. 차단 슈체와 차그리 세네 개체달라. 엔텔라 차발서 슈체와 가르쳤네. 차그리 세데레도. 텔라 차소 nga 시초아 네 세도. 저와 아마 차소 균도 땡 공부시 레몬드 셰베 차소 nga 유 충만라노 차소 nga 잡보던 진름바 제워서 찬양바 셰베 저와 아마 나서 찬양바 셰바네 네 셰바네 저와 아마 나서 차소 균도 마텐시 공부 마제 레몬드 마셰 짱 대달의 니미스 마다베 수마숑아 대다 이라 차소 슈 첨보 진름보 메제 차소 나 이니 민중안에 마제짱 마제 양 차소 나 민중안에 마예노 녀모 충완 손에 제와진의 차소 균도 템바소 마제신 니미스 따와 소 셰베 차소기 유 첨보 이 첨보도 몸보는 하바차바소 비보레 비와 제와 제와 제 충만라 땜메제오 대양 차소가 슈체베네 유름보다 차념바시바네 하정 유름보 많이 받아 녀모 충에네 녀와녀 센네바 도반조로 손도
So now here it talks about the being dominated by the desire or another of those five afflictions means that in a previous life you are fully involved in the afflictions, becoming accustomed to it and express it frequently, so that now even if there is a minor object of desire or another of the five that affliction arises in a strong and long-lasting form. Balanced behavior means that you were not fully involved in the desire and others in your previous lives, So you did not become accustomed to them, and you did not express them frequently. Still, you have not recognized that they are faults, and you have not suppressed them. So while desire and such are not predominant or of great durations, if it is as though they do not occur. Having slight affliction means that you were not fully involved, and so on, in desire or another of those five in your previous lives, and you do see their disadvantages, etc. Therefore, with respect to the object of desire and such that uh, are measure, many, or intense, your desire and such arise slowly, while for moderate or the minor objects, these afflictions do not arise at all. Also, when desire or another of those five afflictions is predominant, you take a long time to realize stability. With balanced behavior, you do not take excessively long time. With minor reflections, you do so very quickly. An answer to the question, uh, an answer to a question of Ravata, as cited in the Shavaka levels, also explain how works on the object of meditation for expertise.
되지. 다른 가서 차단 슈체션 제거에 가서 한번 나서 차단 슈체션의 묘하기 제제네. 아니 다들 주든지 레버센들에 아니 결라 묘하 다 그래서 때 가서 대다 그 맞소 저거 간데지네 주제나이 맞지. 되게 냐냐게 토네 산나도데 다 센델라 가르쳐 봐서서는 되게 차단 슈체션을 님이 따투와이나 네 지와 한번 나서요. 되게 빨리게 내려와잖아요. 야 생 세차해 투에라 베제체 고도 타마타마 될 갈로도 뉴모 추에네 뉴와 센네버 또바 저로서도 뉴모 슈추와인 소나 시네 둘하와 아니 센 네버 템보 데토와 센라 당차여와 데레도.
So here it talks about, whichever the afflictions that are more strong or predominant within one's own continuum, it is all depends on how you're accustomed to these afflictions in your previous life. Because whatever the result that may experience by oneself, intensity of afflictions are coming into being from its own causes and conditions, which is concordant with the cause that we have accumulated in the past in our previous lives. So therefore now, from now on, what should we do is, if one finds a sudden afflictions, it's really predominant in our mind, one should not let this affliction become accustomed to one's mind. One should not let that particular affliction to become a cause which gives rise to a strong affliction as a result in a future life. So therefore, one should pinpoint and one should recognize that and try to target that and get rid of these afflictions from the root of one's mind.
네. 데라 고아야 보시 레투와이 나가서 삼제에서 이게 치대던 저예요. 그러나 맞저기 변에 시발을 세차다 당체 말이야 가르잖아. 디드리 세차로 디드리 세디 레지 주바도 뇨모기 주바네기 티네 세차다 당체 해그 말이 레지 주바도 뇨모기 주바네 세소나 상용고래 당용고래 세더라. 변 저와슈 좀 나 이게 캐바도서 내가 더하러 당가서 다가서 신에 점프 주고에서는 그 신에 로텐차지기 미유레마도 맞아 센세차다 당차생인데 세고야 가르레 당고야 가르레세는 뭐 맞으나 네 그 저런지 그거 마시는 다래서도
This is how we can have a hope for gaining the state of enlightenment, by identifying the afflictions and targeting that afflictions and not letting that afflictions become accustomed to one's own mind, and reducing their intensities and finally uprooting it. And this is how we practice to remove our negative thoughts and emotions. And this is it is not just we are believing and just without any resonance. We're just mere believing and saying that we can get rid of that. But it has a logic reasoning behind removal of our negative thoughts and emotions from one's own thing. Because to become a state of to become a Buddha or enlightened beings, one cannot just gain a state of enlightenment or become an enlightened beings overnight. It requires a rigorous practice of removing all those negative thoughts and emotions from one's mind, and particularly of the afflictions of karma and afflictions of defilements, and those two must be removed. And this can be removed, bit by bit. We cannot just get rid of that in one instance. Will not happen. Reducing their intensity and targeting to uprooting that, and then finally one will able to get rid of the entire afflictions and become the state of enlightenment, or become enlightened being. Sorry. Let's take a 10 minutes break here. So, as I've requested Rinpoche today, this I have to go somewhere I have to be at somewhere at 6:30 today. So I asked Rinpoche to, let's start the teachings a little bit early today at 5:45.
Alright.
Is how
Jesselyn.
Jesselyn, how's she feeling? Rinpoche is asking right now. How is Jesselyn right now? Does anybody know about her?
The last I heard was last Monday. She posts on caring. I forgot the name of the site, but she posts it once a week, and she's weak. She sleeps a lot. Her pain is managed. She's had lots of help from her son and the son's wife who comes into town. She also has had visits, and Diana's partner David has been bringing food. And so she's very, very, very happy about that. She's focusing on her practice, and she seems to be mentally strong. She seems to be doing well.
지금 나죽 춤부셔 봐름체. 어딘저 다테스마 춤도 레송도. 그 천년 보르 차지 독스테니. 더 많지 닝멘되고 면도 쉬우니 워르사. 더 나제 슈티게 템 간다 거의 매일 치도 그 닝멘되고 없다. 대셔라니고. 안데 간다 보러 보고다 보게 한다. 산다 호라니 니자한테 아메사요레스 엔단도 콘주 엔데 수요나치다 명치라서 제시 되게 남게 마공게한테 샬라든 스케겐 콘주티 제고레스 지다 뭐로 따와 냠내자 되게 견 맞제지 니 독시도 네 셈네 베모로 비게 샤라 만다다 샤라 민도스한테 지세도 송도 그러면제
네 그래. 그래. 약간 아니 메시지 갖고 얘나도 뒤쳐서 같이 맨날 저 말을
그래서
당연히 대단하게 먼저 로그인 당에 대 치어 당에 좀 맞아. 걸레면서 가서나서 처음에도 당연히 로그인 당에 로그인서는 단지 됐을 때는 가서 거 가서 대 정치모 시작하는 만데 시작도 갈라다 된 사고 쉬지로 예 예사로
No.
가서기 배 코로 미바 코로에 쏘는데 시에도 걸려니 뭘 카드 자게 쏘 시작하는 신내를 소용도 로 스터디 내가 전부 된 사고 내가 좀 맞아 도착하는데 차도 튀어오는 가서 추기 시에서나 아니 다 로시에 내고 세네래 니 그런 찬송 그런 라저도는 다단히 로이무도
So if you really look at here at the part of teachings, the teachings on meditative serenity. So it doesn't really emphasize only on achieving stability, the mental stability. But rather, it's also along with the practice of serenity or the practice of calm abiding, it actually introduces you to what kind of object of meditation should be chosen, which is targeting towards elimination of our negative thoughts and emotions. So we are not only it is not only emphasizing on in pursuit of achievement of meditative serenity, but also eradication of our negative thoughts and emotions, which I think is very, very profound.
다 캡이 미발라 간사기 좀 봤을 때 다니 가서 이게 시제기 논데 가사 시바노쟁이 미비 개체들 시제기 논데 나주시베 논탄에 시제 따라서 되게 지발에 다 캡이 미발라 간사기 좀 봐서 나주시베 나주 게테 게노 nenjo pa nenjo shoba dele dishe tangje je range senila gyundo moba dadan senje da so da jo da so wa da gaza ji mobola gyundo moba shi yena ne pombola kebala sen nyawa de ba shedo jula gyundo moba shi yena ne khala keba shawo jela moba shi yena ne jinche la keba mata ba da dongya da me bala gyu da me bala gyundo moba shi yena ne tenjin dewa nywa la keba da ne da ne mayin ba la sen nyawa to ba shedo shesomba te mi ba de nga ne so moba do ba shedo nyomo ba te tere de nga ne mi ba de nga kere do so moba do ba shedo so de kebi mi ba gi mi do go ba de tere do
So now here says as cited in the Sharvaka levels, also explain whose works on the object of meditation for the expert. Lao.
니들 창조 통입니다. 그 내가 스케일 가서 되게 당지에도 설정이나.
이제
니들 채워대 통보다 충분히 자신도. 근데 자도 비게 유로는 당인들이 레비컬라 그 동행 타도 통유 매나 채워야는 메시다 채우면 러셔로지.
그래서
나한테 충분히도 통하면 돼 자신도.
근데 간데 도름시.
지금 최근 나 통도 간데 통.
네, 난다 첨보나 지역 도름시.
아니 얘들 된대도.
맞죠.
야야. 야. 오케이.
So now here let's read the text again here. It says Ravata, if a monk yogi, a practitioner of yoga, is confused about the characteristic nature of all composite things, or confused with things called person, self, living beings, life, and which is reborn or the nourisher, he should focus his mind on the object of meditation for expertise in aggregates. If he is confused about causes, he should focus on the object of meditation for the expertise in constituents. If he is confused about conditions, he should focus on the object of meditation for expertise in the sources. If he is confused about impermanence, suffering, and selflessness, he should focus on the object of meditation for expertise in dependent arising, and on what is and on what is and what is what is not possible. So as this states, you mainly use the 5 objects of meditation. Stop confusion. Which person should focus on the mind or object of meditation for dispelling affliction is also stated in the Sam Sutra answering the question of Ravata.
Deta taking them got it or Nazo keep me Nazo Chedanso Kasan Chotogita, Koro Chavina, and then Shenegi Mibatella Chobi Mibasi, the Kangala Church in the Juchi, Shiba Nonjagi Mibasina Losona, and the Kansa Teta Tegi, and Yomongabula Soba Kanshu Chava Denila, Deni is giant. And then Kebi Mibasona, you may be Nancy Kangi Patenila, Jeba Chibitone, and the Mobato be down the Lich. And then Yomonaja Mibasiti, Kankoala Rabatan, and then Dimbi Nanjinje. So
now, we earlier that we talked about the 5 types of object of meditation, right? The universal object of meditation, and the object of meditation of purifying behaviors, object of meditation of expertise, and object of meditation of purifying afflictions. So the object of meditation of universal object of meditation is object, whichever, there is no particular object that is to be chosen. You can choose any kind of object. That is what is meant by universal object of meditation. And then it's a purifying behavior object, which is whichever the afflictions that actually dominates your behaviors, and this should be chosen and apply antidotes towards that. And then an object of expertise. I think there are 4 object of meditations. Expertise should be chosen, and not only that you choose the object of meditation, but analyze that object of meditation and understanding the actual mode of existence of object of, in other words, understanding the ontological status of the existence. And then finally, Nyomon Namjum, which means the purifying afflictions, object of meditation and purifying afflictions, it talks about focusing one's mind on the coarseness of the desire realms, and then calmness of the form realms, and focusing on the coarseness of form realms, and then calmness of the formless realms, and so on and so forth. So now, with this method of practice of meditative serenity, it's not only to sharpening your subjective mind only alone, but also it will give you a clear appearances of objective phenomena as well. And not only it actually enables you to maintain the stability of your mind, but also sharpness of your mind, and also enables one to understand actual mode of existence of things and event.
Depuis quand tu de cha dans Jewa Doba was in on Jewan Dubila. Jewan Doba she in on it, Doba no Rabba Rabanita, Zuna Jishawani Lao. Zulan de Chatan Jewa Doba she in on it, Zuna Rabanita, Zumibananchi, Shawa Nila, Saint Yawa Doba Shadow. Jisola down Saint Joan Dub. Number 2 and the machine on it, denpa donghe tang, denpa kyunjung tang, denpa gopa da, denpa lang la, senyo toba, she to she son so. Mipa dena ne, hatong ki she gang she pa, tang, she ne je, jogang she pa, niki mipa doye, she ne kuni mipa mayi jang, kachi ne, sondo. Kachi ne mi rong.
Okay, here now, which person should focus their minds on object of meditation for dispelling afflictions is also stated in the same sutra, answering the question of Ravata is referring to. So it says now, if you wish to be free from the attachment of the desirums, then focus your mind on the closeness of the desirum and the calmness of form realms. If you wish to be free from the attachment of the form realms, focus your mind on the closeness of the form realm and the calmness of the formless realms. If you wish to become disenchanted with all of the perishing aggregates, and wishes to be free from them, then focus your mind on the truth of suffering, the truth of origins, the truth of cessation, and the truth of the path. So it says then you can use the object of meditation both for analytical meditation with insight and for stabilizing meditation with serenity. So they are not exclusively object of meditation for serenity. Still, since some serves as object, oh, the daughter
다 맞춰 돼서 시제가 놓으래 대다 기업인도 맞아 개체 카드 시계에나 아니 난 려바 이니 모델을 시비지 려바를 되니 조금도 텔레다가 줄을 지니 조금도라나 아니 강공이 나지지 시라나지 시내라 되네 아니 강공만 두고 되네 상대 동번에 좀에지 봐도 주나 주에지 되메바제 단지 가서 나 타바다 단지 쳔바 터그에 있어서나 아니 댐비 나제지 아니 저 덴제 지솔라다 원래 녀만다네 아니 좋아 시 telha tene nyumola ni nyimitane ni dami batone ni tawada tajijime kogon tene nyogare se tanda tere.
So now this should, this the paragraph actually states that if one wishes to be free from the attachment of these desirums, then it says one should focus one's mind on the closeness of desirums and then calmness of form realms. So this is how we should you should begin to focusing one's mind by competitiveness of the closeness of the lower realms or the lower realms and the calmness, the competitiveness of the calmness of calmness of competitive of the calmness of the high realms, and beginning from first meditative concentration all the way to the formless realm. Just comparing that closeness and the calmness. And then if one wishes to free from the perishing aggregates to wish to achieve liberations and state of enlightenment, then one's focal object should be the Four Noble Truths.
다 단단 가서 강내 시대에 아니 신의 미바리에서니 강인바데 아니 신의다 하톤니가 미바리에스 신의세네 조 조강이 찬의 시거리 하톤세데 조 제강이 찬의 시거리 손도아.
So then it says the object that we have mentioned earlier is not exclusively the object of meditation of meditative serenity. These objects are common object of both meditative serenity and insight. So meditative serenity is the mind, the single-pointed concentrations, which means the meditative serenity, and insight is something that is more analytical.
다 같이네 신의 사도 주비 민바 정라지 같이네 신의 주 생비 체바의 시비 민바 조에 신의 주 민비告诉 谢바 예노 소도 디 단다디에 민바에서 신의 사도 주비 민바 인비 체바 여마레서 데레다다
Still, since some serves as object of meditation for newly achieving serenity, and others are used for a special purpose after attaining serenity, I've explained them here in the sections on the object of meditation of serenity.
미비 나던 템바 네사 강라 센종이 제데 땡엔제지 미테 하시비 미바 나지 존예 나사 넘버 로라 나이 나와 디 미게 나던 네 예살레 소도 배제 로샤가 예살레지 존예 대양 존예 시장 샤 땡엔제지 세마당 땡엔제지 쉬유지 유당 定言自己特当定言自己国的一了是比担当能的那么多比绿当当年写着下的在他的西九公布当准备昨年的民给当着一把这把小我写送吧大肉送
So then here it says synonymous of the object of meditations. They are synonymous for the image or the mental appearance of those object of meditations explained above. This points upon which the attention is kept or meditative basis for concentrations as stated in the Asangas Sharvaka levels. And also that image is called image. It also is called sign of concentrations, object in the domain of concentrations, technique of concentrations, door to concentrations, basis of attentions, body of internal conceptualizations, and appearing image, and know this as synonymous of the image, which are accord with the object that is known.
then the kan yu sonya ye so na de ngo ma yi shi lo la tang yi cha chi le sonya se la go ro che dang yin ka du yin
So now we think about image. When we say something that is image of this and that entails it's not the actual object, but the particular actual, this is the image of the particular actual object. That means it is not the real one, right?
Tendrigan Pena Shenetu Bicola, Pena Medubal Migo and Medupati Sonia Yela Shesedi, whenever Tedan Chado Chilol and I chatted the Sonia Salagua.
So here the image is, for instance, if one is taking an image as an object of meditative serenity, then you're actually choosing an image of the actual object. Not the actual object, but the image of that actual object, right?
Tell things that you show you scenario, things that you use scenario, things that you yell shipping, not actually cigarette.
So these are all the synonyms. Here it says an image. It is also called sign of concentrations, object in the domain of concentration, techniques of concentration, door to concentration, and so on.
Just a kind of me, not all say you when I'm also Tisha because of what you sugar and can't yield not be chachilla senamado, must be Zulata Naki Zute Maroa. You want to check Zuchiroa.
So when we think about meditating on the body of Tathagata, meditating the actual body of Tathagata, and we are actually not looking. You are not looking at that, at that body of Tathagata, but you are conceptualizing. You are actually imagining that body of Tathagata. That is what is meant by the image, and that conceptualization, the object that has been chosen for your, focal object of your meditation is the image.
Mi passe na tradichilo kwa pena ngaso menlo na gizonya sala yuna shege gizonya la na shego no lo la so so gizu peji shawe de ngone mare ko gizonya ro de na gi ge tingen zeng ge yi ta da yu mo bo de chang kha je ne Deda de mipa yila shiba di isana, deda de zunye yila shene, kanjane de woro.
So it's just like when you see your face in the mirror, but your face appears in the mirror. It's not the actual face. It's an image of your face, right? And similarly, when we were talking about choosing a Tathagata's body or the as one's object of meditations, you're imagining it is the image of Tathagata's body. It's not an actual body of Tathagata.
Tichi. Ta kazu babi mipa ngazunga ne sonda ta, wana mipa tema shiba deda le, de mipa kala tene shene du nyana. Tene nga chambi dode, deda re dode, deda jide mange de, kansa sheda ki mipa soso la shago la, chiba tu shene re mata shi ngepa du na, decha she chawa la soba yena ne, mipa ngepa chen la shago de. Te majana shene jitimbi tingenzi toba si jang shene ngone metobi shede. Sheba nangja ki mipa la she jang yu rinpo mato shene miduba sona. Sheba nangja ki mipa toye miduba tachi mibi shero. Sheba to nato shu chewa ne ngeba to longamba shago so. Kansa re ane chat nyangba sheba nyumo chungwa shi yina ne nga sheba tare mipa nga sheba nangjan nane yi kan chowa la mipa shao sondu tere tendu.
So now identifying object of meditation for this context, it says. Now, from among the many objects of meditation I've explained, on which object of meditation should you base yourself so as to achieve serenity? As stated in the sutra passage cited above, there is no single definite object, definite objects. Individuals record their particular object of meditations, and especially if you are determined to achieve serenity at the least, and if your behavior is dominated by attachment or other afflictions, then you need to use certain types of object of meditation. For if you do not, then you may attain a concentration that approximates serenity, but you will not attain actual serenity. It is said that even if you train with the object of meditation for purifying behavior, you will not achieve serenity unless you do so for a very long time. So how would you ever achieve it by rejecting object of meditation for purifying behaviors? In particular, if you have a predominance of the discursiveness, then you definitely have to meditate on the breath. If you're persons of the balanced behaviors of the person with slight afflictions, then as explained before, make your meditative basis whichever of the object of meditation explained above most appeals to you.
Tatege kote wandwa, maso pena desha shuchimbo shenge jena ngenpa to desha ki nyenpo tene shene drudu mato, desha ki nyenpo matenwa che shene sudu druna, shene dru sigma re sondwa. Pena shepa nangja ki mipa teni la, desha shuchimbo chi yinpa kanshe la, desha ki nyenpo te matenwa che, pena la yi koda wachi la shene drugu ya na, tengen zi jetun bachi mato, tengen zi chenji sawa chi, dru sigma re sondwa.
So now here, meditative serenity cannot be achieved if one's mind is predominant by the attachment. In other words, one particular afflictions, because just without medicating the intensity of one's afflictions, whichever the affliction that is more predominant, just mere focusing and choosing one object, such as image of Buddha's image or the Buddha's body and so on, and try to meditate on, and you will meditate upon, you will not be able to achieve meditative serenity, because we need to first mitigate your intensity of your negative thoughts that is actually so manifested, because it will then give rise to all kinds of distractions. The distraction is the obstacle for achievement of one's meditative serenity.
마타 신내시 중에 신나 세디 마소 미시 신타케 마제 신내 지고 주의 대마도 차기 매나요 차소 쉬체 뭐이나 동보 차소기 님이 님보 된 그래 세데 냥가 친구 쉬우지 송샤.
So it particularly emphasizes by saying that, especially if you are determined to achieve serenity, the least, and if your behavior is dominated by attachment or other affliction, then you need to use certain type of object of meditation. For if you do not, then you may not attain concentration. Now you may attain a concentration that approximates serenity, but you will not attain actual serenity. It's very clear.
아티치 다들 가서 땡겐지 주비 지고 개체면 시와제 세이바 뒤진에 소소랑을 칼로네 가르가를 님보된 거 10여톤에 년에 저거를 개체버려도.
So then here, now, of course, in this particular context, we're talking about how to achieve serenity and concentrations, right? But in our day-to-day practice, we should relate this particular practice to our day-to-day practice by identifying whichever the affection is more manifested and more gross, and targeting that particular affections to getting rid of that particular affections from one's own mind.
당아서 더 자비 다 다나가춘데 단다 거서 보고 계사 사비 대천비 대선도 사비 계산은 쇼지도 담비 탈라테네 아니 다 신라송제 로랑지라제네 조베 산지 공연 요한이도 타바다 아니 하바도 다징가서 토마 라바나게게 아니 잠을린데니라 아니 단다게 강에 되다는 미도 셴네 아니 강가라 대신 지고 용토에게 아니 공안도 많아지다.
So now let's do our dedications, that whatever the the virtuous conduct that we may have conducted for this 2 hours of time, and also our accumulations merits of 3 times, and may by the power of all those accumulation merits, may we be able to achieve this meditative serenity, unity of meditative serenity, special insight, and also let's take this opportunity to dedicate our merits towards the people who are undergoing tremendous amount of suffering due to the war.
Nedon Rowa Gyalo Kombedo Chebo Josen Losan Chabai Tembe Niborin Lejen Sho Saji Bujin Shuji Mendo Zhang Zhezhou Linje Nyude Jingbu Sanje Shimdo Minde Bewai Gogen Nanda Xinla Chebo Shu Jiwa Gyundo Yangda Lama Jibin Chiji Bela Long Xue Jin Sada Lang Jue Yune Rodo Doju Changge Gobo Nyundo Shu Yida Guru Minzhi Langa Naya Daya Min Dene Rindu Bele Soni Kada Yamba Kanshi Sabade Lomi Mari Kedan Jawana Nanjin Jaye Wambo Dajuji Dama Sumbi Sera Kundo Yang Jambi Yanje Zebe Jizoni Dimbi Rinpa Kyunsan Nanje Jo Nyene Rubi Jena Nyeshi Sho Rangi Jijin Dobi Nanje Ni Shudan Sebe Changye Tage Je 若月夜觉明报谁见呢？了月电波有人在纠结，两波人间就给马交报，悄悄娘报举杯说的呢，年节千百也到这报应。天天天天生活幸福说，世间教育民众真的来住相救郎就人别讲，唐的郎就一郎别的心，教育自我人多终究见，朗诵主编天前主席见，眼见世界不当明明根。切罗格多教育好不也？朗读这我们就接，刚才听不出了就是这，最近住了怎么的原则？土地能就到处住些钱，这些政策说要就安全，就是让民国才找点钱。能够承担数据结果动，罗总对比正面扫松解，注意面色到多年就解，广州人民呼吁新公司，平东的我们的永远的，现在在我电子交作业，小百姓的报道点就解。两边抱怨直到前方东，更多中国电影电影的，跌到根据技术道路去，给我跌到当街绕多梦，别从西边叫我当街。我刚那就多我不的。大千个月早晚的跟讲，从不学习劳动梦就。哎呀，对不起，thank you。